This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rapin. Joining me this week for episode 378 of this forever running show, two Real Housewives of the local comic shop, Zach McCrary.
What's happening?
And Kara Shemborski.
Hey.
Thank you both for joining me this week. And double thank you to Zach, one of our newest IRCB regulars. Welcome to the show, Zach. Could you tell the folks at home a little bit about yourself and what you do outside of this here podcast?
Outside of this here podcast, I do way too many other podcasts. I'm a co-host of TFD Nerdcast. It's just kind of a general nerd culture show. I do the Comics That We Love, which is like my baby, where we do deep dives into books, talk about why they're great. And also Comics and Beer, which is not safe for work and is just two guys having kind of bar talk about comics and drinking really delicious brews.
Amazing. You know, and I will say the Comics That We Love, I was a guest at one point. Paul was very recently a guest talking about Love and Rockets. It's a really fun show. I highly recommend all the stuff that Zach's doing, but the Comics That We Love is the best because it's had me and Paul on it. Oh. But I very much would like to come on this Comics and Beer podcast. I know you and I have talked about it a little bit, but it sounds like a raucous bunch of fun. So super excited to have you here on I Read Comic Books, and I'm ready to talk about comic books in general. One last thing I should say, shout out to our latest patron, Matt. You're a fantastic human being. Thank you so much for joining. Very much looking forward to the commissioned episode that you set up. That's coming a little bit later this year, which is a big one. We were talking about it in the IRCB like secret chat that we have for just the folks on here, and it's going to be a big one. Tia was very involved in some of the talking points, which means that it's going to be a really good episode. So let's get into things. I've got two legally mandated questions that I have to ask, and that's how have you been? How have comic books been? Let's just kick it off with you, Zach.
Life's been pretty good. I gotta say, it's one of those things where everything is going right, and because I'm a pessimist, I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop.
No, relatable.
No, we don't support that here.
It's like that everything's coming up Millhouse, but everybody forgets what happens to Millhouse by the end of that episode. but yeah, everything's going great. It's been a fun week. I'm kind of in between needing to read stuff for the show, so I got to catch up on my huge stack of books that I've been meaning to get to. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been a good time.
That's awesome. What have you been reading?
Oh, man. So let's see. Some of the books that we'll be talking about later on this show. But also, let's see. I read Indigo Children, the first like three or four of those. That was a really fun read. I caught up on The Forged, the
nice
Greg Rucka book. Man, I'm really digging that one. I'm a mech kid. I was a BattleTech kid, and so I have fun with that. Peacemaker tries hard, because Kyle Starks. I'll read anything from that dude. There's a book called Monomyth out of Dark Horse that I started. That's kind of like a fantasy horror kind of vibe. It's like Squid Game meets Saw meets Harry Potter in a weird way.
Okay. Okay.
I'm digging it. Yeah, I'm just all kinds of stuff. It's been fun.
Nice. Very nice. Well, let's just dive into some of the books that we read this week, I guess, to talk about them. You've got some books on your list, The Dead Romans 1 through 4, I guess. You want to walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed that book. I read the first issue while I was still on my trip abroad in Vietnam, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to continue with this one. So Dead Romans, it's through Image Comics Shadowline. It's written by Fred Ty Kennedy, illustrated by Nick Marinkovich, and it's a loose retelling of the Battle of Teutoburg Forest. It's a huge Roman defeat led by Arminius, who was a Germanic prince who was raised in Rome and therefore knew how the Romans worked, and he took that home with him to basically be like, we don't want you here, and I'm going to help make sure that you go away forever. And it worked. And it's a really, really fun book. Gorgeous painted panels, an interesting story about the battling the might of Rome. And there's also this love story angle that is completely fictional for the story that I find really fascinating between Arminius and this slave girl named Honoria, and because his intentions with her are, I'm going to raise you up to be my queen, but is she loyal to Rome? Is she loyal to Arminius? It's kind of still up in the air, and it's It's
also,
really good.
She's a slave.
Yeah, I was gonna
so
say,
has
like-
no age. Like what? Like what?
Yeah, well, yeah, she's kind of a badass though.
I'm a slave
yeah.
and I'm gonna be queen one day because this dude is grooming me to listen to his every whim.
And-
Fuck off.
And he never tells her that's his plan. Like, she doesn't
No,
know
this
anything
man
that
is
he's
trash.
doing.
This
So
man is trash.
So I'm very excited to hear about the inevitable betrayal at the end of this. But well, I guess we'll have
I
to
I
feel
read
he's
hope
it.
coming.
she rips
Okay.
his heart out Kalima style. Like, oh my god.
Listen, this guy's just retelling history, Carrie. He's inserting some fiction, but it's just history. Okay?
No.
Kidding.
Get out of here with
Kidding.
that Game of Thrones shit. Stop it.
Well,
Unfortunately, Wikipedia did not say anything about heart ripping out of Arminius, so
right.
yeah.
Well, you have to let us know, I guess, how this wraps up in the future, if it wraps up well or not. But Kara, I guess let's jump over to you. How have you been? How have comic books been? What have you been reading?
Oh my god, Mike, it finally happened.
It happened?
I had to stop reading a book that I started. This kills me as a completionist.
No!
But for once, for the first time in a long time, I had to stop reading a comic book because it was just so disappointing. As you know, I saw the Spider-Man movie. And I really wanted to read more Spider-Man comics. And specifically, I wanted to read more comics about Hobie because Spider-Punk was one of the best parts of the film.
Absolutely.
No spoilers. That's just canon fact. And so I started. So saw that there was a whole book about Spider-Punk Battle of the Band. Ha 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 ha.
Okay.
Which came out last year from Marvel, I think as single issues, and then they made it a more recent trade paperback. And like, clearly this is supposed to be a film tie-in and be like, oh, you saw the movie? You want to read more Spider-Punk? Here's more Spider-Punk. No, don't fall for it. False.
Oh, no.
So it's just... Okay, so the thing that I really liked about the character of Hobie is like, just from him talking, you had a full sense of his identity and sense of place and the way he moved in the world and what his ideals were. And all of that came from dialogue. It was great writing, great acting. I didn't realize that was Daniel Kaluuya. Like, yes. Okay, so this book is not that. This book, within pages, the dialogue was so clearly not up to the level of the film that I had to stop because Hobie, the dialogue that they gave Hobie was very, well, like, what about this laser gun? Like, he had the word like with commas around it in his dialogue, as opposed to the intricate, like, Cockney slang riffs that they were doing in the film. They just put the word like in the middle of his sentences. And I'm like, look, I just did it. I just did that. That's what that sounds like. That's not Spider-Punk. Get out of here. And like, I kind of wanted to keep reading because there was a Captain Anarchy who was like, seemed to be like a gay Native American riff off Captain America, and I was like here for that, but not enough to suffer through like Hobie. Like,
oh man.
And I love the word like as a filler word. I love that, but for Hobie, it doesn't. I had to stop. So instead, I went on Wikipedia and said, Wikipedia, where do I find the Spider-Punk? And that's when I learned that Spider-Punk is new circa 2015 from the Spider-Verse event, which I did not read when it was coming out. So I was like, all right, let me start reading Spider-Verse. First of all, this is why comics are dumb. You know, like comics are so obnoxious. Do you know how many books I had to download before I realized that I found the correct Amazing Spider-Man number 10 by Dan Slott? Dan Slott has written too many Amazing Spider-Man number 10. Like, right. Why? Stop renumbering. This is why people hate you. Like,
Marvel just loves renumbering.
No, it makes it hard to find what you're trying to find, and that is a bad user experience. And unless you are committed to finding it, which most people are going to tap out, and I get it. I almost tapped out when I realized I was reading something else entirely about Scorpion or Scorpio or something. I don't know. I don't even know.
Scorpio.
Scorpio. I don't even know. So that was a different series. Anyway, so I found the Spider-Verse series and started reading it. And I did not get to Spider-Punk yet because I am too enraptured with the Volturi making an appearance. for the 5 of you who haven't seen Twilight, the Volturi are like the elite vampire coven that rules all the other vampire covens, and they're like fussy and elitist, and it's that like picture of, I can't remember his name, with like the longer hair, like looking down on the peasants from a balcony that you've seen memed everywhere. That's the Volturi. That's the villains in the Spider-Verse book. I didn't realize it, but they go through the multiverse eating spiders on their like opulent banquet table, and I was not expecting to see the Volturi around these like spiders trussed up to eat on their fancy banquet table with like family politics. It's like the Medicis in here, except they're all going through these like golden webs, and all the Spider-Men are assembling with no context or background whatsoever. And I was like, comics, yeah.
Oh my god.
So dumb. And I was reading.
Kara, I feel like now you have to like do a double down deep dive of the entire Spider-Verse event just so that you can fully flesh out how these Volturi came to be and what their place is in the greater Twilight expanded universe.
Volturi that eat spiders. That's all I need. This is why it's like this book fits with our episode theme very nicely. It's so dumb. They're made, and it's so 2015. They made a Benedict Cumberbatch joke. There was like an image of Peter waking up in bed shirtless with like the sheets riding low on his hips, and the caption for the page was "Don't look at Peter's butt." And I was like, well, I wasn't before, but now I am. Thanks. Like, why tell me not to oogle it if you're just gonna like put it? You can see his like lower back dimples and everything like that. And then they go right from that to Silk showing up. And like, I read the Silk comics in 2015. I was reading Spider-Gwen and Spider-Woman. I was not reading the main Spider books. And like, clearly I missed the part where Silk and Peter are horny for each other because reasons. And so it's like they go from "Don't look at Peter's butt" to like 2 panels later, Silk showing up and Peter being like, "Oh no, we're horny for each other because we have spider hormones. And like, we just need to have sex, but we're not going to because I'm stronger than that." And I was like, a man wrote this. And also, we're halfway to a romance novel here. And Dan Slott was definitely reading pornographic fan fiction in 2015 because that's where this comes from. Like, hello. So, and it's like, if this was done, if you gave this to a romance author who is like an established writer, they have to have sex because reasons is one of like the tropes that you can run with. We are already halfway to a like adult romance novel with this, but instead we get Silk like writhing around on Peter's bed with like her legs open in various angles, and she's like, "Peter," and you're like, a man drew this. Oh
my. This is real, Carrie. This isn't made up. You're not just pulling our chains here.
This is the first issue of Spider-Verse, and it's so problematic that they're just sexualizing Silk because she's an Asian woman. And if you look at just disproportionate sexual objectification of Asian women, and instead of like, if this was like done by like probably a female romance writer, they wouldn't have done the whole like, and then Silk was writhing around on his bed, but he was the strong white man who could say no, and he has a job to do, and meh. And it would have been like more even. But because like this dude artist was drawing this Asian woman with like her legs open, being like, "Oh, we're so attracted to each other. You need to leave the city." I was like, oh my God, what editor looked at this and said, yeah, let's do that. And then they go into Spider-Verse. So I'm like, all right, so this book is everything. We've got Volturi. They're eating Spider-Man trussed up like chickens on their table. We've got Spider-Man and Silk being horny for each other. We have a million Spider-Man, and it doesn't matter because you have your little box telling you where they're from, and they have to save the multiverse, Peter. And Peter's like, I guess. And I'm like, yes, this is comics. This is great. This is okay.
Amazing.
We're fine. I am not to Hobie yet, but I have hope that the rest of the book will make me want to continue reading Spider-Verse because everything so far is killer. It's like, this is what great event books do. They're really dumb and they're fun in weird ways. Like most event books, I'm just like, why do I have to know so many things for something to happen and be negated a few issues later? And instead, I get Spider-Verse. And I'm going to keep reading because I am delighted by the insanity I've encountered so far.
Okay. I don't know how to follow all of that, Kara.
No,
I'm
you
going to
just
be
got to start
completely
rereading
honest.
Spider-Verse and be like, oh yeah, Kara was right. This is halfway to sex. They are halfway to sex in this children's graphic novel. Can't even
Jeepers.
say it. Can't even think of the children.
I remember when Silk first appeared, and it was within like the first issue of her appearing that they were just bumping uglies, and they just explained it away as spider hormones, basically, that they
Because
of their
reasons they have to have
yeah
sex.
yeah.
I'm telling you, this is romance tropes.
Oh, brother.
It was like, who are you? Who are you? I'm me. You smell real nice, and then just kind of goes, you know.
Yeah, now you can try to top that, Mike.
Yeah.
Well, I'll try my best to, I guess, top things. I don't know if I can with that Spider-Man discussion.
Good luck.
But I did read, I want to talk about 2 books really quick, and then we're going to jump back to another book that Zach read. But I read In Hell We Fight #1. This is by John Layman and Jock, J-O-K, not J-O-C-K, different Jock, which I think is maybe the most confusing thing that Image Comics has ever done. But I can't blame the artists. I can't blame anybody. It's just how things are. So it's John Layman and Jock, J-O-K. This is like a really kind of goofy story about people in hell, like souls in hell, who are desperately trying to get ice cream, which sounds like a really goofy concept, and that's because it is. And it's really funky because like John Layman apparently wrote this book in the middle of like the pandemic. He was trying to like write something that was a little bit optimistic and kind of fun, versus I think a lot of gritty, grimy stuff that kind of came out of that time being in lockdown. And he worked on this book. And so the opening bit of this book is we get to meet our main characters. We've got a kid who was drowned when he was alive, and so he like is this kind of bloated corpse who can puke up anything for some reason, that comes with a bunch of seawater, or lake water, I don't remember. And there's a kid who was killed with an axe to the back of his head, so he can just infinitely pull axes out of the back of his head because every time he removes one, a new one shows up.
Wait,
and then we have another.
is
Go ahead.
the axe like sticking out of the back of his head?
Oh yeah, the axe is just sticking out
So
of
it's
the
like a
back of his head.
prop,
Like I said,
like a replenishing prop.
yeah.
That's great.
It's hell.
I love that.
You know?
Continue.
It's really funny, and it gets used to its fullest extent in the first issue, which is amazing. And then there's another woman who's kind of like the leader of this little roving gang of weirdos. We don't completely know what her powers are yet, but I think we're going to find out as the story continues. And then a little demon who lives in hell who just wants to hang out with these other kids. It's kind of adorable. Like, this book feels really dark on the surface, but it's really funny. It's just full of jokes and goofy stuff. And so these kids are trying to get ice cream in hell, and they discover something significantly more interesting when they knock over a truck. So pretty fun little book. The lettering is kind of bonkers. John Layman, if you've read Layman's books before, specifically Chew, and then the second book Chew and Outer Darkness, like Chew, Chew, and then the sequel series Chew, Chu, in the same universe.
Lovely.
They're all lettered by John Layman, and Layman does a very interesting thing in his lettering. It's where you get all of the fun little word bubbles that look like they're frozen or on fire with the special fonts and stuff. And I think Layman really, really cares about lettering because, as it turns out, he used to be a letterer for years before he started writing comics, which is why he letters his own books, I think. And so it's a really interesting, fun book. The lettering's kind of bonkers. He does some really funky stuff with it in this book that I liked. And pretty fun little book if you're looking for something new to try from Image Comics. The other book, that's In Hell We Fight #1 for anyone asking. The other book that I read is The Incredible Hulk 2023 #1, another Hulk #1 in the last 5 or 6 years.
Why?
This is just for Danny. I just want to, because Donny Cates ended his run and somebody else needed to take over a Hulk book.
There has to be.
This is
there has to be a better way to renumber comics. This is a different episode, but
I know. It's a totally different episode altogether because we were just complaining about this, and it's fine. We'll get it. We'll get it on the books for the future. But this is Philip Kennedy Johnson with Nick Klein on pencils, and Matt Wilson on colors. You know, the wonderful Matt Wilson. And ultimately this book is ridiculous. It's the awakening of the monsters, and Hulk is like the ultimate monster, and so all these monsters from beneath the earth are coming back to life, and they need to get the Hulk because he's like the most powerful there is, and they want his skin or something. It's kind of gross but
Ew.
really fun, and it's Philip Kennedy Johnson, so like he knows how to write a really good story. Like overall, like his books have really good beats to them. This first issue had a really good beat system. Like it felt like it was on pace, and I was kind of surprised when I came to the end because it's so well done in that regard.
Mm.
The concept is goofy. The monster, I don't want to say queen. She's like the monster eldest. She's the eldest daughter of the queen of horrors, as they call it. And she awakens all of the monsters in the Marvel universe to go hunt the Hulk. That's essentially what the story is. I'm very excited because Man Thing is in it, and that's really fun.
Hell yeah.
And I think Son of Satan is also going to be in this, which I'm like, every single time someone's like, let's do something weird, they pull in Son of Satan, and I'm on board for that too. So
Hellstrom doesn't get much play anywhere, really.
That's the thing. He always shows up randomly, and then I think everybody who's reading goes, why is he even here? And then he disappears from the comic. This one, I'm sure that Johnson will find a way to rope it in to have it make sense as a monstrous character. But yeah, really fun little book.
I am just hung up on you saying that this is like an eldest daughter situation, because I have been reading and feeling seen by a lot of eldest daughter memes on the internet. So the second you were like, this eldest daughter unleashed all the monsters, and I was like, you know how else we can resolve that? Therapy, maybe. But monsters sounds cathartic too.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a goofy concept for a book. It feels very like 70s comics where you're like, we don't need to really explain why this is happening. It's just happening.
Sure. Like
Kind of situation. Yeah, like so yeah, it was really fun. The other book that I was going to talk about, but I already did an entirely different podcast for, which is Ultimate Invasion, was my pick of the week last week. I went and chatted with Danny and a couple other folks about this book for about an hour on Friday. So if you're looking for that, go check it out on the Next Issue Podcast YouTube channel. It was a really, really fun time. I was a little drunk, but somebody said that I was very professional, so maybe I should drink more often. I don't know. That's not an endorsement. Don't just drink for funsies. Well, never mind. Let's move on.
But do drink to be professional, apparently.
Don't drink to be professional. Zach, did you read anything else you want to talk about before I talk myself further into a hole?
Yeah, man. And I feel like I'm going to bring the house down. Like, this has been really jovial and fun, and I'm going to talk about some like heavy stuff, because like, trigger warning, the book that I'm about to talk about does deal with someone dying of or in the process of dying from cancer. It was a Something Epic by Simon Kodransky, and he wrote and illustrated it, as well as he translated it himself with aid from Adam Morwill, letters from DC Hopkins. This book is just absolutely gorgeous. It's so gorgeous, starkly drawn, like the line between realism and fantasy, with like the story of this main character being this very grounded and drawn very realistically in his world, and the colors are a bit more dark and and withdrawn, but then at the same time he is able to see these various things like cartoons and pulpy comics characters and manga characters and pixelated video games, and it feels like the vibe is that whatever we create with our imaginations does pop into existence, like a tulpa basically, but that normal like people can't see it, but this kid somehow is able to, and it's just part of his normal life. Like, he doesn't react to it mostly, like sometimes he does, but he doesn't interact with it really, and like it's just the way he's used to living. And I mean, it's a very heavy story, because at the core it is this little boy who is with a single mother and is watching her die of cancer, and dealing with the loneliness of feeling different, and being kind of secluded. It's like the use of magical realism is just fantastic. I love magical realism when crazy bombastic stuff happens, but and to us it's nuts, but to the characters in the book it's just normal. Like, there is a scene where a crazy Dragon Ball Z looking manga character is fighting this weird superhero with a horn in the middle of his head. I think he was called the Texas Horn. And they're fighting, and they smash into the kid's aunt's car and just decimate the front of it, and then they fly off and continue their battle, and his aunt comes out, and the kid's just like, the tree fell on your car, and that's what happened. And then and she just accepts it, and is just, and she's just like, well, thank God that thing is insured, and they move, and the story moves on, like,
Yeah.
I love that kind of stuff. But it's a really heartfelt book. It really hit me deep. Like, honestly, like, being a kid who went through what that kid went through, like, that hits me on a level different, I guess. But
Totally.
like, the story itself is just, I'm enjoying where it's going, because I'm not entirely sure yet, like, what the
Yeah.
something epic is. It's really taking its time and building towards that, and I really appreciate that. And I'm just loving all the ridiculous crap that Kudransky is throwing in with pixelated ninjas, and there's a vampire cat, like a cartoon vampire cat, and I love it. It's a really interesting book.
Yeah, this is the this is the top of my pile, I should say, a couple weeks ago, and I was really floored by the amount of insane stuff that was packed into this one book. And I'm very much
Yeah.
hoping that Kurdansky can keep this up on a monthly pace to just like get the book out so that we can experience the really insane story that he's got for this kid. Obviously, there is this darker, sad tone that kind of runs through the core of it, but I think everything else to this book, it like blows my mind that one person is capable of all of these different styles in one book.
So many
Like,
different styles.
it very much reminds me of like the way that Marco Rudy approaches his books, where like each page is just littered with different painterly styles left and right, and pencils, and some pages are inked, some of them are watercolors. It's like, how much time did it take you to do just this one page? That's where I'm at with this book. Just that it's an impressive feat of artistry.
It is. And I do think that it's going to take on a very different feel as we go on, because I feel like there's a character who's been sort of introduced, and I feel like we're on the cusp of that character opening a whole new world for this kid, and we're going to see a lot of crazy stuff happening. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, I think I missed the second issue of this. I'm gonna have to catch up. What am I doing with my time?
Oh, it's a good read. It's a good read.
I don't know. Well, something epic. I mean, if you're interested, but I guess let me talk about one more book before we get into the top of our pile. I just want to mention the best sci-fi book that's being published right now. Period. I don't care who you are. This is the best sci-fi book. Time Before Time, number 24, dropped very recently. I think this past week. This is Rory McConville and Declan Shalvey on writing, art by Jorge Coelho, colors by Chris O'Halloran, and letters by Hassan Otsmani Elhau. This is a 5-star comic. Period. This is probably one of the best books I've read, like single issues I've read in the last year. Time Before Time, if you don't know, is a story about time travel, and it's a story about a guy who's basically trying to get out of working for this crime syndicate that uses time travel to move people across time in order to save them, and puts them in severe debt and all these other things that you could do with crime and time travel. But there's one thing that you can't do, and I think it comes across in every single time travel story you read, which is affect your own time, right? Your own storyline, right? With knowledge. And there's still a question of like, how would you know if you're affecting your own timeline? But like beyond that, this issue is specifically about that, because every once in a while, Time Before Time does these one-offs that like fleshes out the world, destroys your heart, reminds you why this is the best sci-fi comic being published today. And ultimately, this is an issue about, what if you try to change your past? Something bad happens to somebody, they try to go back in time, and we find out why you can't do that. Now, that's kind of a spoiler for the issue, but ultimately the way that they do this is super heart-wrenching. It breaks your heart. There's just so many things that happen in this issue that I'm like, this is why it's the best. It's funny though, because 24 issues in, and we finally get to this question being answered. It's been kind of tucked away and not really talked about. It's just a thing you can't do. It very much reminds me of Looper. I don't know if there was a moment in Looper where Bruce Willis is talking to what's his name? Joseph Gordon-Levitt, the younger version of himself, and they're like, how is this happening? He's like, let's not think about it. That's kind of the way that this book has approached those paradoxical things in time travel. And this issue explicitly gets down to that. And I think the answer that they give is stupendous. It's probably one of my favorite moments that's happened in this book. And there have been some incredible moments. So, I don't know. At this point, I'm at a point in my head where I don't care where things go in this series, as long as the story continues to keep me interested with issues like this. It continues to knock me upside the head with like things that I want answered, and then when they do answer them, they are the most interesting answer they could have given. So yeah, this is why this is easily one of my top comics on the shelves right now. It's a book that I will basically die for. It's really, it's like that and Department of Truth. Like, you can't get me off this Image boat. They're publishing two of the best comics in the market as far as I'm concerned. So
wow,
that's Time Before Time 24. I know.
I'm ready to read.
Gonna have to
go buy this book is all I'm saying. Anyways, all right, well, let's move on to bigger and brighter things, I guess. Let's talk about books that are on the top of your pile, comics that are new or old, or just things you're trying to get off your shelf. Let's move back over to you, Kara. What's on the top of your pile this week?
Oh, wow. I forgot about I have a copy of Cosmoknights. I have a copy of Cosmoknights Volume 1 on my bookcase.
Yes.
And when I read it, I was like, this is amazing. This is one of the best comics I've read in like the last decade. I love it so much. And then I promptly forgot about it. And so the other day, I was like, oh, there's Volume 2. Go on. So
yeah.
So top of my pile is rereading Cosmoknights Volume 1. I don't remember the intricacies of the plot. I remember the art being fun, neon, modern. We're in space. We're like a bunch of gay lady pilots in mech suits smashing the patriarchy. I'm like, that's all I need. We're good. I'm done. Okay. I don't need it. I don't need additional information. I'm glad the art is good. I'm glad the page layouts are interesting, and not interesting for the sake of being interesting, but interesting in a way of moving the story along. And I would like to continue with this story, please. So Volume 2, and then slightly cheating, but because I said mechs, I was like, robots in disguise. Transformers. This week in the ominously titled Secret Chat, which Nick said, the IRCB like group text, Nick told us all that Skybound is doing a new Transformers series, and they were doing like a slow reveal of the cover of like which Transformers are gonna be in our book, and it was a very fun game. And it was like my brain just like slowly leaking out of my ears in the chat, because I have such a bright gleam in my heart for G1 Transformers, because cast your mind back to 2007 and the Michael Bay Transformers movie. I was obsessed with that movie. I cannot tell you how many times I watched that film. I picked up, I like went on a date because I ended up talking to a friend of a friend in a bar, and we were like geeking out over which score titles were our favorite ones from the movie score, because you know what, that score's a good score. Okay, so anyway, because of that film, I got really into Transformers, but I would like to clarify that I know the Transformers almost exclusively through Transformers fanfiction, because G1 Transformers fanfiction writers are like so good at what they do that like I don't need to watch. I started watching the cartoon, but frankly, the fic writers are doing a much better job of creating the kind of camaraderie and shared experiences that are delightful to read about. It felt like the fanfiction that I was reading at that time felt a lot like the way the Teen Titans TV show made me feel, where you're just like, I just want to watch these, like when they're not fighting, I just want to like hang out with these people on their downtime on their couch playing video games and stuff. And like that was the vibe. Anyway, so I love the G1 Transformers because of this particular experience. And so this new Transformers series from Skybound that I think is coming out in October, we said. So it's like it's later, still down the path. Happy Halloween to us all. And just like the lineup of the G1 Autobots that were on that cover, I was like, hell yeah, Optimus Prime. Hell yeah, Wheeljack, Cliff Jumper, Ratchet, RC. Okay, sure, yes, take my money. I'm gonna have to find a comic shop. Damn. Okay. So very excited about that, even though it's several months down the line. So in the meantime, I am now inspired to revisit some other Transformers comics. TBD on which ones those will be, but I just wanted to let everyone know that we should all pre-order this Transformers book, so it keeps going. Thanks.
Transformers versus G.I. Joe is a pretty wild and crazy time. I'm just gonna say that we covered that
one.
We covered it extensively on the show way back in the day, and I think it would be hilarious to revisit that. Only because it's insane. It's absolutely insane from start to finish. But yeah, Cosmoknights. Volume 1 and 2. I'm also excited about. I will say your forgetting about Cosmoknights is totally understandable because the first volume did come out in 2019 and it is the year 2023. So like it's been a minute. That being said, the creator on that book has been publishing it like page by page on their website, so you can read a lot of it online, especially Volume 1. But yeah, since they're doing it like page by page and kind of taking their time with it, totally understandable for it there to be like a 4-year gap. Like you got to live your life. I totally understand.
Also,
that.
Some things were happening between 2019 and 2023.
Yeah, did something strange, crazy happen during that time?
It was different. It feels like it was a different time. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Anyways, Zach, what's on the top of your pile this week?
I am looking forward to reading Spirit World numbers 1 and 2 from DC Comics, written by Alyssa Wong, art by Heining, colors by Sebastian Chang, and letters by Janice Chiang. It's coming out of the Lazarus Planet Dark Fate was where like the sprinkling of this story kind of starts, and they're just kind of expounding upon it in its own book. It's part of DC's We Are Legends initiative, focusing on Asian heroes from Asian creators, which I dig. The new hero's name is Xanth, and can venture into the spirit world at will, can burn items folded from joss paper and immediately turn them into real objects. So like joss paper is a thing out of East Asian practices of burning this paper at graveyards in order to send resources to ancestors in the spirit world.
Gotcha.
Except Xanth can do the reverse and be like, got a paper sword, boom, got a giant broadsword now. And that is their favorite weapon as well, is a giant broadsword from what I've seen. And they wind up teaming up with Constantine to save Batgirl Cass Kane, who's been dragged into the spirit world by Chinese hopping vampires. Yeah, I'm excited about it because
hopping vampires.
Yeah,
did I hear that right?
You're way too casual about this. You're like, yeah, it's like
this is normal fare right now,
guys,
DC, right?
This is hopping vampires, you know.
I'm hung up on the broadsword thing because my brain is instantly going, that's heavy. Is part of the power that they are magically able to lift and wield any of the things that the paper can generate? Because broadswords, heavy. Those things are heavy.
They're big. They're
big. Superheroes. Come on. They can do whatever they want.
Not the Bat family. Like, limitations. Their superpower is money.
Why do you think Cassandra Cain needs to be saved? Clearly.
Yeah, she couldn't deal with the hopping vampires, so Xantha has to come in and take care of that because they can carry a big broadsword with no problems.
I guess.
Yeah. I'm digging this. I the whole We Are Legends campaign that they're doing, I think is really cool. My soon to be stepson is Vietnamese, and all of his favorite heroes are just the typical white dudes. And and so I think it's cool that in this modern era of comics, we're getting so many more new and interesting Asian characters. We were just talking about Silk earlier, for instance.
I don't think Silk is a great example of this if the meta writing hurts.
At times.
Yeah.
You know, it's the big two. It's hit or miss. But I just think it's cool that there are more coming into the superhero realm that he'll be able to see, you know, that are more like him.
Yeah.
It's the big two. It's hit or miss. Might as well be the anthem of this podcast.
Of every comics podcast.
Yeah.
Unless you solely focus on Marvel or DC and are getting paid by them. Basically,
right.
Yeah.
We are not getting paid by Marvel and DC. We lost that a long time ago. The opportunity.
Marvel won't even let us onto their PR list.
Yeah. What?
Oh man.
Yeah. Exactly. One question I have for you, Zach. Did you read the Iron Fist that came out pretty recently? The like little miniseries that came out where the mantle was handed over.
I did not. I wanted to wait until it was completed. I assume it's completed. So I'm gonna have to get that one.
It was a pretty good read. I mean, I'm a sucker for Iron Fist. Like, blame Matt Fraction and Ed Brubaker for making me just love the lore. But like, I love the new take on that character. It was really, really fun. So I think you'd like that, since I think it's a Chinese American guy takes over the mantle, and then has to like go to across the world to basically interact with all these other like Asian country based heroes in order to find pieces and solve a problem. I won't spoil it, but it's pretty cool.
Oh, that's cool.
As he's learning like the mantle of the Iron Fist, it's pretty good.
That makes me happy. I was really worried it was going to wind up being Shang-Chi and that they were just going to be like, hey, we got an Asian, put him in there. I'm glad that they actually like have a whole new character.
Yeah, there's a couple of characters like I'll let you experience it. It's
Cool.
really, really fun. I think you'll dig it. But let me talk about a book, or before I get into my book, we got some folks hanging out with us on Discord that have some picks. Danny is reading The Oddly Pedestrian Life of Christopher Chaos. This is the new James Tynion joint. I think this is a like 2 or 3 issue series, something like that. I read some of it on Substack. Danny, you'll let me know what you think, because I got some thoughts. Hugh is reading Indigo Children #4, loving this series. Glad that someone else is reading it. Paul G is reading Kent State 4 Dead in Ohio, which is they're reading for the Book of the Month challenge on Goodreads. That is a heavy book, but boy, oh boy, it's good. I cried at the end of it. It's amazing book. Durf Backdurf does a stupendous job just like portraying a very terrible thing that happened, and with as much like, I don't know, honor to the people that it affected as possible. Like he's a fantastic storyteller of nonfiction things. So yeah, definitely recommend that book if you haven't given it a chance. But it is capital H heavy. But let me talk about a book that I'm excited for. This is called River's Edge by Kyoko Okazaki. From renowned author Kyoko Okazaki, the creator of Helter Skelter and Pink, comes a story of adolescence filled with friendship, drama, intertwined relationships of 6 high school friends. Decaying secrets are revealed as they forge friendships from pain, find betrayal in pleasure, and stare into the face of death itself in a field of gold by a stagnant river under the smoke-filled skies. I don't know if that sounds interesting to anybody else, but this book to me sounds like it's going to devastate me and be the funniest book I've read at the same time. Kyoko Okazaki's books, Pink and Helter Skelter, that they called out in the synopsis here, are 2 books that like are in this different style of manga that I didn't know was possible. It's like really weird, eclectic, like josei manga that really like plays with the idea of like what makes comics think. I don't know.
I read Pink. Pink was
Pink is amazing.
Pink was like, it's the genre of manga that you're talking about is like targeted towards I think it's like officially like middle-aged women, but I think it's like women over 30.
Yeah.
But Pink is like, oh, our protagonist has a pet alligator in her apartment and she's got to like figure out her life. And I'm like, okay. More stories about people who aren't teenagers, I guess, for most of us who aren't teenagers but still want to have adventures. Thank you. So definitely enjoyed that one. So I'm delighted to hear that there is another intriguing work by that author happening.
Yeah, I'm super hyped for this. And it's got a cover by Becky Cloonan, which I think is really cool. I'm very excited to have this like weird slice of life thing that's probably going to be strangely horny on my shelf. So we'll see how it goes. But I will report back. But yeah, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about our quote unquote comic book guilty pleasures, if that's even a thing anymore in this year 2023. So we'll take a break and we'll come back and talk about that. For our show this week, we are talking about comic book guilty pleasures, in parentheses, revisited. And I say that because apparently the last time we talked about this was in 2016 on episode 73, which is crazy. If you want to listen to that episode, you actually have to be a patron because those episodes are lost to the ether otherwise. Like I have copies, and if you're a Patreon subscriber, I can give you the RSS feed to subscribe to that. But otherwise, it's out in the ether. It was me and Paul and Nick way back in the day talking about our guilty pleasures. So today we're going to take a slightly different approach. Zach came to me and said, Mike, next time I'm on the show, we're going to talk about guilty pleasures. I got some stuff I got to get off my chest. It's just been eating me up inside. That's what you said, right, Zach?
All day, every day. It is my horsehair shirt to bear, and it's been killing me, and I just need to get it out there.
Yeah, well, good. Unfortunately, Kara wrote us an essay in our show notes, and she objects. So I guess, Kara, I'm going to pitch this over to you so we can talk about guilty pleasures and maybe why they're not a thing anymore.
Yeah. Feed me your hate, Kara.
All right. Buckle up, buttercups. Here we go. Okay, so the more I thought about this, the madder I get, because first of all, I resent the implication that you should feel guilty about the things that you like, especially because so many of the things that we do think of, or at least I think of when I think guilty pleasure, air quotes, tend to be things that are either considered like women's stuff, like gossip or reality TV that's centered around relationships and rich people being rich, like the Kardashians. Like I was so long just like, oh yeah, the Kardashians are my guilty pleasure. No, I fucking love them. They're terrible. I want to watch all of the stuff. I follow them on Instagram. Like, oh my God, more. Give me more. Not guilty. I have so
right.
I mean, and,
like you don't feel guilty for enjoying the content they produce that you know is of a certain category, right?
It's trash, but like I want more of it. It's very shiny. This is something that Tia disagrees with me on because she grew up in LA and so understands that they are truly trash in the way that New Yorkers understand that Donald Trump is truly trash. Like before, like nobody, no, you really have to be like from the hometown to really understand why somebody shouldn't be paid attention to. But since I'm from a different coast, I'm like, oh my God, B-roll of LA. Thank you. Anyway, so I digress. Like, or like guilty pleasures are like foods that we're quote unquote not supposed to eat. Like if we eat some M&Ms or ice cream, or like it's like, but so much healthy food is out of reach. So it's like all of it's like tied up in our cultural obsession with being thin, which like also I think disproportionately affects like women, and it's like a commentary on like how women should be like looking and existing in the world. And it's like, am I feeling guilty for eating this burger, or am I mad at the current state of the world for making the burger cheaper than getting and maintaining the ingredients for a salad that is also filling? Do I have time to make a salad? Do I have energy? Anyway, so it's just
comic. Let's steer it back a little bit.
Towards comics. Okay, so in comics, like, does this like what is it that I'm supposed to feel guilty about? It's like, am I supposed to only like stuff in the dude canon of like Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns, or just things that Alan Moore has written in general, that's like all in those like top comics that you have to read, that as like a teen and college age woman I read because it was what I was supposed to read, but I wasn't interested in it. But it's like, oh, if you didn't read it, you're not a real comics fan. Or like guilty for not liking stuff that's like outside that like more highbrow art or cartooning world that like Drawn and Quarterly and Fantagraphics publish. So anyway, so let's assume let's assume that a guilty pleasure is like anything like lowbrow or commercial or something that a snob would scoff at. And I'm saying like a comic book snob. And I know, listener, you have a mental image of this person. So what would that person think you're silly for reading? And also fuck that guy.
Right. So well, that's the thing is like, it's so funky, this topic, because and Zach, I really want to hear your thought on this, because I know you wanted to talk about it, and we are definitely not actually here to rag on you, right? We're trying to be totally open and accepting of this, because I think there is a thought, right? Like you said, Fantagraphics, Drawn and Quarterly and stuff. I have a whole slew of Megan Mogg comics on my shelf that are from Fantagraphics, and I will tell you, that is not highbrow stuff. Simon Hanselman knows what they're doing with that book, in terms of like being gross for the sake of being gross because it's funny to them, and they're hoping that other people find it to be funny. Right,
but
well.
I mean, like, you can picture the person in your head who's like, oh, you read superhero comics?
Sure,
you know?
sure.
So like that kind of thing.
That's totally true.
Like,
totally true.
So when I was thinking about what do I love that the generic comic book snob in my head would hate, and it's like the stupid comic book crossovers that only exist to make money, and I refuse to feel guilty about it. Like, the only people who should feel guilty are the people reinforcing the economics of creators not getting paid appropriately for their work. Let's be real. All right. So things that came to mind to me for like the Transformers My Little Pony crossover. Oh my God. The Green Lantern Star Trek crossover where the lanterns were doing their Rainbow Lantern thing, and they were like, which Star Trek original series member would get which color ring? I'm like, yes.
I'm trying so hard to not be mad about these picks right now. So let's just keep going, Kara. Just keep going. I'm slowly becoming the comic book snob right now.
Oh my no. Or like, okay, I still have not found this in digital, so dear listener, you know where I can find this. Please tell me where I can find the Teen Titans X-Men one-shot from the 80s where Beast Boy and Kitty Pryde flirt the whole time. Like, I know this book just exists to make money, but like, hell yeah, I want to see the Teen Titans and X-Men team up in the 80s. Of course I want that.
That seems like a natural like pairing. So yeah, I get that.
Yeah, so like those were things that came top of mind. the like I get a certain like feeling of childish glee when I'm reading a comic book and I'm like, yes, this is the comic book, like that first issue of Spider-Verse where I was like, comics, everyone. So, like,
Yeah.
you know, like
Yeah.
anything IDW has published, basically anything Archie did in the 60s, the NASCAR Christmas special we read a while back.
Yeah.
I would actually
Oh yeah, I'm gonna turn you on to an episode, Zach, and it's gonna blow your mind.
And I would actually put Once and Future in this category, the Kieran Gillen thing about like Arthurian lore, because even though he's being a super nerd about it, that book is a comic book, man. Like, you read that thing and you're like, yeah, he's resuscitated, he's glowing, he's got a sword, let's go.
Yeah. So I guess I'm curious then, Zach, I guess when you approached me with this topic, I guess what was going through your head in terms of like the type of books that you would put on this list, and like why do they feel like guilty pleasures to you?
It's funny because like the idea of a guilty pleasure is funny to me, because I tend to be the person who just unabashedly loves whatever they love, and I could give a shit what you think about it. Like that's that's the way my brain works. But I think it's just the idea of the guilty pleasure, like the thing that is so close to you that you don't care, that's a guilty pleasure to me, is like you love it so much that it doesn't matter what everyone else thinks about it, that it's your thing, and the rest of the world kind of be damned. And things like she was mentioning, like the crossovers, like I love the He-Man Thundercats, like that was
the what?
The He-Man Thundercats.
No,
yeah,
we're stopping right now. I'm going to read
stop recording
right
again
now.
today. Sorry.
You can come on the comics that we love. We'll talk He-Man Thundercats. But yeah, like that kind of stuff is great. You know, it's a schlocky good time, and who cares that it's schlocky, because it's fun. Because like you said, it's comics, everybody. You know, like,
okay, but then why is that guilty? Why is that your guilty pleasure?
See, I think it's because that is just the term that is applied to it generally. Like, I don't really feel guilty about the things that I love. Like, for me, like one of my what most people would consider a guilty pleasure for me is the Clone Saga. Because that thing takes nothing but crap from everybody, but I do not care. It gave me my favorite character in comic books, period. It gave me Ben Reilly, and I love the story
that's where Ben Reilly's from.
That's Ben Reilly.
That's where Ben Reilly's from. Yeah.
Full circle. Okay.
There we go.
Yes. From last week when we talked about, Andy Samberg did a fantastic job with Ben Reilly. I hope you agree with that.
I mean, it was a very different Ben Reilly than I expected, but I sure did enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I love the Clone Saga. Yes, clones have been done to death, and yes, maybe the big reveal of Norman Osborn, not great, but I love the tale of figuring out, who you are through your memories, and are they your memories or are they not your memories? There was a lot of good stuff there, and the damn thing sold well. It kept going because it was making money. But see, now I'm just defending it. But see, and there it is. It's the kind of thing where you love it so much that you can't help but defend it when other people want to take a crap on it. Like for me, that's like a guilty pleasure, and I guess there isn't any guilt. It's just a pleasure, really. Like when I break it down.
But like, then there must be a feeling of guilt if you feel like you have to be defensive about it, right?
I don't think it's guilt as much as like if someone tried to attack my fiance, I'm going to turn them into dust, and because I just love that person. So like that's kind of the way I feel about this book. Like I love this book so much that the moment I hear someone talking trash, it's on. I can't help myself.
Well, I don't think I have quite so strong feelings about my next example, but definitely one of my like quote unquote guilty pleasures. You will tear Garfield from my cold dead hands, like the Garfield comic strips.
See, but like
those are great.
I can't imagine a world where anybody's like, oh, you like Garfield?
But
like,
I
hate
I've
Garfield.
gotten that before. Like,
really?
Well, this person doesn't understand anything about
they have
comic
a
books.
soul?
Then they're idiots. And I'm glad you don't associate with them, Kara.
Yeah, just strike them from your life forever.
Yeah.
Anybody out there, I don't care if it's your mom or dad, just strike them from your life.
Yeah.
No Garfield apologists here, just Garfield assertionists.
That's
Yes.
right.
Yes.
That's right.
We live for the Garfield future.
Garfield forever. No, but then I was thinking about like, okay, what if I'm rejecting the the general idea of something that's a guilty pleasure that we do have in society and really make it like, what is something that I genuinely feel guilty about liking? And I keep coming back to like, what do I do, with my shelf of Harry Potter books behind me? What do I do with a creator who I either know or highly suspect is trash, but I like their work? Like, I
Right.
remember reading Planetary and having my mind blown, and I really want to revisit it, but I'm like, oh, but Warren Ellis,
I
oh, like, what do
know.
I do? Do I enjoy the work? I know we've talked about death of the author to death on this show, but like, that's what I came
Sure.
back to for guilty pleasure. It's like, what do you do if you like something, but you know the creator behind it is maybe not somebody that you would want to like financially support or like enjoy? Like,
Yeah,
what do I do with
Yeah.
that?
in like the modern era, I think maybe you just hit on what a guilty pleasure really is now.
Yeah.
Now that
Yeah.
now that we are able to know the pieces of crap that some people just happen to be that make really good stuff. I had the
Mhm.
same thing happen. One of my favorite bands growing up, uh, the guy who was like the heart of it was going to the Capitol, and he was there and was on film, and I was like, oh, I don't know what
Oh.
to do. I love all of these albums so much,
Yeah.
but I hate this man now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is like maybe that is what a guilty pleasure is nowadays, is having to cope with loving Harry Potter but not being thrilled about Rowling, or that kind of thing. Maybe that's it. But yeah, what
Yeah.
do
No,
you do with that? It's a hard question.
yeah, exactly. It's like I don't know what to. I think we've talked about this at length on the show as well, right? Like the death of the author stuff in terms of
Sure.
like those books. Like I think there's a difference between enjoying the work for what it is and continuing to support that creator, right? Like to say like I'm going to speak with the money that I have and not buy your next books or
Mhm.
not buy anything, which in a lot of cases for Warren Ellis, for instance, like hasn't really worked in comics in a minute, and I don't think has any plans to. If you follow some of their other stuff, like they're working or he's working on like a bunch of other things that you could choose to not support. I choose not to support them. But I don't know. It's really funky. Like Ellis is a good example, but like like Frank Miller, I think is also out there in terms of like a weird creator. And it's like, I love his Sin City book. I understand all the problems with it. Like,
Yeah.
and I will fully acknowledge that those, like, that's a perfect example of a guilty pleasure. A book that I know is full of a lot of problematic stuff, but like, I still enjoy from like a theme perspective or like, I don't know. This is where I'm going to speak my piece because I do like some web comics out there that are just like dumb garbage jokes, right? Like Megan Mogg is one of those kind of like guilty pleasures. I love those books and I would never recommend them to anyone. Extra Fabulous Comics is an example, a web comic strip that I read. Perry Bible Fellowship, which I think has a new name now. But those are also like comics that are out there that are just kind of like dumb dick and fart jokes that I find to be very funny, but like I'm never gonna be like, you're gonna think this is great. It's like, Mike, you have the humor of a 7-year-old. And it's like, I do to an extent. But I also recognize like that there's some people are gonna like that, some people aren't, and like I'm never gonna be like, here's my number one pick for you. Here's a whole book full of like dick and fart jokes that I think you're gonna like, versus like I'll give you some of the good stuff, and then eventually, if I think maybe you might find this funny, I'll give you a Megan Mogg book and go like, let's really test the waters here, to see if our friendship is true. But like that's to me, that is where my guilty pleasures lie, of like books that I recognize, like Planetary, Transmetropolitan, books that I love to death. Can't really recommend those to people because I don't want them unknowingly supporting someone that has like a tarnished like state because they've done things that are like irreprehensible or reprehensible. I don't know the word. Yeah, I guess like it's tough because we have to like if you lend a copy of Transmetropolitan to someone and you say like, hey, by the way, this person is trash, but this book has some pretty interesting, insight into like journalism and sci-fi and blah, blah, blah. Like maybe everything you recommend has to come with like a little asterisk like that. But then we kind of run into the good place problem, right? Where everybody is doing bad, but that's maybe a bit too into the weeds on this conversation. So
No,
I don't know.
because now I'm thinking about like also on my bookcase with me, I have a whole bunch of Tintin comics. And like
Right.
I love Tintin comics. They're great adventure comics, but they're also like oh, it was a different time. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't excuse the racist shit in here, but like,
Yeah.
so
Or
it's
like a
like,
Lovecraft for the same kind of reason.
yeah, so it's
Sure.
like, do
Yeah,
I
Sure.
tell people you should read Tintin because it was one of like the seminal comics internationally, like anywhere in the 20th century, and like the storytelling's really good? Or do I be like, hey, you should read this, but also like, I feel a little uncomfortable handing you this thing because it does maybe not so great a job of portraying like black and brown characters with any nuance whatsoever.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, and then you,
But I think, but does this kind of all come back to like we don't want that reflection on ourselves to say like I don't think like you don't want to hand someone a Tintin book and go like Kara thinks that all of these depictions are a-okay.
Right.
Because I don't think that that's the case, and hopefully someone that you're handing it to would know that about you. But again, we maybe have to like hand some of this stuff off with like a disclaimer that like, oh, by the way, there's going to be some pretty rough portrayals of people of color in this book, but outside of that, and it's hard to like
it's
justify a
like,
book
but the
after that.
storytelling is
When I
great.
start, yeah,
And
yeah,
the cars are really beautifully illustrated. It's like,
yeah.
Yeah, it's a difficult line to walk, because like you said, you don't want because you like Harry Potter doesn't mean necessarily that you have issue with trans rights or anything like that. Like it.
right.
But we, in this world of tribalism that we live in now, you will be put in that box just immediately.
Potentially,
Like,
yeah.
potentially. But by people who don't know you, they will just like, there is a good chance that they will jump to a conclusion, and I think that there is a fear of that, and therefore a bit of guilt about, is this wrong? Should I still be enjoying that thing? But yeah, it's a hard question. It's a difficult thing. I think it's different for everybody, the way that they would approach it.
I've got an
Yeah.
extreme example. It's like, oh, you like Batman, so you support a billionaire vigilante who operates outside the state. And
Well, we just saw what happened with that, so I don't know.
Oof.
Sorry, had to do it. Yeah, that's a very interesting extreme example that I don't know if I want to go into, because I have two other guilty pleasures that I did want to talk
Go
about for
on.
today. And these are mostly because they're books that I really like, but I don't think are actually particularly good. But because when I read them, they were like foundational comics for me, I'm able to like look back and go, that wasn't good, but I understand why I like them and why I still kind of like them today. But again, I wouldn't necessarily say they are comics that I'd like recommend because they're so good. But again, it's this guilty pleasure of like, I know it's not good, but I like it. One of them being Squadron Supreme by J. Michael Straczynski. Particularly, there's a lot of J. Michael Straczynski comics that I really like that I don't think a lot of people I would recommend to people. But Squadron Supreme is like a gritty, modern, dark take on the 70s era team Squadron Supreme by J. Michael Straczynski, where he reimagined these people in like a modern era. Squadron Supreme, for those that may not know, was like Marvel's answer to the Justice League, where they came up with this alternate universe superhero team where there's a Superman, there's a Wonder Woman, there's a Batman, and a Green Lantern, and a Hawkman, if I'm not mistaken.
There a Flash too?
Oh, a Flash. That's what it was. Not a Hawkman, a Flash. And so you got a speedster, you've got a rich billionaire, you've got a Superman, you got a Wonder Woman.
A rich billionaire.
But they were like, yeah, a rich billionaire. They're a vigilante billionaire.
Sure.
And they were really goofy. And so Straczynski says, like, let's write these modern, gritty takes on these characters and introduce a new universe where they exist. And they kind of had this idea, I think, of putting out this Marvel Max universe of these superheroes, and they did it for a minute. Eventually it crossed over with the Ultimate Universe, which was really fun, and I ate all this stuff up. I think though that this series was kind of an inspiration for The Boys, which is saying something, because while this book is dark and gritty and has murder and sexual assault and all the bad things that make dark and gritty books bad, The Boys, I think, took this to another level, right? It takes it to the extreme. And it's funny because Squadron Supreme came out in 2003. The Boys comes out in 2006. And so I think they're kind of related. But I like this Squadron Supreme because I thought at the time when I was very early in my comics reading career that this was like the epitome of like modern day super gritty books. And like I wasn't reading a lot, but I was reading this next to Ultimate Spider-Man, so I felt like I was getting like exact polar opposites in terms of like tone and things like that. And to me, it was like this is adult comic books.
Let your
but it was published under
come out.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. I understand this is a book made for 2000 era edgelords.
Yeah. No, you were listing all those things that came out in 2003, and in my head I was like, the Losers came out around that time also.
Do you guys remember the Losers?
I love I've got a copy of the Losers on my shelf right now. Are you kidding? I watched that movie again the other day. Oh my god. I love that movie so much. Talk about a guilty pleasure.
We got to get that on the IRCB movie club, because I would love to just that scene. Danny just posted a GIF. Chris Evans in the elevator, probably one of the coolest scenes in superhero movies. Or I guess like comic book history, but whatever. Yeah. So Squadron Supreme's up there as one of those books. And I think the next one that I had as well, Spider-Man Origin, another J. Michael Straczynski book. Everyone probably has heard of this, because this is the book where Spider-Man realizes that he has powers because he has a connection with a spider god. And he ends up losing his Spider-Man powers and getting new powers from this spider god, where he has the wrist release spider power thing that comes out of his body organically, plus a bunch of other weird cocoon things and all this other stuff. Because we had to do something gritty and different. And then following this immediately is Brand New Day. Marvel was like, wash it out. Yep. Wash it out, JMS. It's bad.
It's giving Flashpoint.
Yeah. But yeah, but those books, like, I mean, Spider-Man Origin is a book that I know gets a lot of like crap on the internet, and I still love it, but I understand all of its problems. Just like this Squadron Supreme, I still love it, but I understand all of its problems. And I think that's where we have to come to terms with a lot of these books, is like knowing the problematic things and not necessarily condoning them, but like, I guess like just being able to digest that while we still enjoy them.
I've got something that fits in this category that you're describing. Okay. This space that you're carving out, Mike, where you're like, understand it's bad, still read it. I read a lot of Grimm's fairy tale comic books for a while, guys. Ooh.
In my head, I was thinking Xenoscope books, and I was like, Kara.
No, they're not good.
Oh, that's what I was thinking.
No, I do not recommend them. But this is when I was like, deep into my, if it's a fairy tale, I want to get my hands on it, and reading, and I was like, oh, female protagonists. And like as I was like developing my understanding of media consumption through a feminist lens, I was like, oh right, these are written generally like by straight men for straight men for the purpose of like having physically unrealistic women to be attracted to. But also, it was fairy tale comics starring women who were like kind of hot. And I'm like, okay, so they're not good. I wouldn't recommend them. If I reread them now, I would probably have some very strong feelings about it. But at the time, I was like,
wait. Oh, these are Xenoscope books.
They are Xenoscope books.
They are Xenoscope.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Every
okay,
bad
I thought I was
thing
going
that you were thinking is correct. These are not things I would recommend. You should not be reading them. But also like, they're for a specific demographic, and I like the idea of a remixed fairy tale, and I wish that there was like more of that genre that was less objectifying of women. But like, now whenever I'm like at a Comic-Con and I pass the Xenoscope booth, I'm like, bye. But like, thank you for your service. Please stop what you're doing.
Some of these covers look like badly reimagined romance
They're
covers.
really bad. They're really bad.
I imagine
it's just, I'm like, you're halfway there. You're halfway to something interesting. You're halfway there, and you stopped at big tits and unrealistically thin waist. Like,
right. Michael Turner, baby. I don't know. Rest in peace. I don't mean to disparage.
No. But like, that's part of it too. Like the Mike. So interesting that you brought up Michael Turner, because Batman Superman Volume 2 Supergirl is one of my favorite comics like of all time. That was hugely important for me. It came out I want to say like mid 2000s. It was one of the first like big 2 books I read that was like happening currently from when I was reading it, as opposed to like getting books out from the library and stuff. And I thought that Michael Turner's like drawings of Supergirl was like the most stunning thing I'd ever seen in my life. Like, I was a teenage girl around that time, and so I was looking at this as like, oh, like on some level this is what I'm supposed to look like, which nobody looks like that. That's super unrealistic. But like, I don't know who the colorist was on that book, but like, there's this one like full page shot of Supergirl, like a close up on her face, and her like lashes are full, and she's got like perfect blush and like lip gloss. And I'm just like, oh, you're so pretty. Oh my God. And like, but like, also there were scenes where she was like walking through Metropolis shopping with Lois Lane, and you could like see her thong coming out of her low-rise jeans. And I was like, okay, now we're back to Supergirl being underage, and you're making
Right.
you're making the choice to draw like a midriff shirt and like a visible thong on a girl who is underage. Again, reading stuff about Supergirl online is where I first learned the term jailbait as a teenager, which is not a term that I needed to know. Thanks, internet. But like, that's the kind of thing where it's like, I love that book. That is not how like a teen girl should have been depicted. But like, for me, I was like, hell yeah, this is awesome. This is so good. Now, I don't know if I'd recommend it to somebody without like going into this whole spiel that I've just shared with you.
So, you're like, right. I'm going to give you a book, but it comes with a 15-minute lecture before you read it.
Watch this video that I made specifically for you.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. And, you know, like Michael Turner, incredible artist, but also I think had this exact problem. Like this every woman that he drew was like is the perfect definition of the problems with the male gaze, right? Like all of his Witchblade covers, I mean, like, and he's renowned as one of these people that like had done a lot, but also this is extremely problematic, right? Like the way that he's depicting this character in Supergirl. So yeah, it's like, how do you recommend a book like that was clearly something that was very informative to you or formative for you, but like it has all of these hangers on that you have to like add little notes and all of this, like the annotated Supergirl by Kara Shaborsky is what we need.
It's like, you can appreciate this book while also understanding that this is not the proportions of a human torso. Your abs will never look like this because you are not on a starvation diet. And like, you know, you will never have this bone structure. So
this person is basically a god, so you will never be this.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I don't know. This is Zach, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to bring up here. I know we've kind of like gone all over the place with this topic, but like I kind of expected no less here.
No, yeah, I feel like we've hit a lot of really interesting things. I would like to dumb it down for a minute with another one of my guilty pleasures in air quotes. Sure. If you don't mind. So the one like at the top of my list is Supreme. Are either of you familiar with Supreme?
I feel like I know the name, but I don't. Are we talking about the shop, the drop shipping company or whatever?
They're not drop shippers. Company?
They're not drop shippers. I know.
I also was thinking of Supreme, the hype beast company, because there was a visual pun reference to it in the Spider-Verse movie that I giggled at.
Yeah.
No, this is a character back at the dawn of Image Comics when Rob Liefeld started his Extreme line. So we're going edgelord because nice. This is one of his many knockoff characters, Supreme, or as I like to call him, Murder Hobo Superman.
Good.
He's got 36 biceps, pecs the size of a golden retriever, and only speaks through gritted teeth. Nice. Just period. He fights aliens that look like living versions of Azrael's armor from like the Batman armor, that crazy 90s, and as well as a version of Thor who's constantly screaming, "Where's Hitler?" Because he was frozen during World War II and he got loose and is mad and thinks Hitler is still alive.
I thought you were saying "Where's Hitler?" Like we're doing a thing because Thor is a neo-Nazi now. And
no. He wants to kill Hitler.
Okay, thank you for
and he's convinced that Supreme, and he's convinced Supreme is now working with Hitler, and they fight. And it is. I mean, it is just. It's a schlocky mess that makes up for its lack of story with crazy 90s art and a metric ton of violence. And I don't know why, but I love the hell out of it. And also, eventually, other people do get to write the character, like Alan Moore, who he changed Supreme completely and decided to use him as an apology letter to the world for what other things he's written.
Uh-huh.
He basically said that. And
Okay.
he turned Supreme into kind of a beacon of hope, more aligned with like Superman of the Gold and Silver Ages. And yeah, those were really cool, but give me Supreme fighting aliens and surviving a nuke and dealing with a hostage situation by just brutally murdering the terrorist before anyone even knows he's gone. Like, he full on Leroy Jenkins. He was teamed up with the Wetworks team, and he didn't want to, but he was like, fine, I'll go with you. And they go to JFK airport, and the leader of the team is like, okay guys, here's the plan. We're gonna go in slow and quiet. We don't want anybody to get, where's Supreme? Where did Supreme go? And then Supreme walks out and is like, I took care of it. And he like lasers through a guy's face. Like, that is Supreme. And for some reason, it's the only thing that I have actively collected. Like, it's the only book that I have actively collected all of the issues of. Amazing. I don't know why. It's ridiculous.
I kind of want this guy to go on a road trip with Lobo now. Like, same vibe.
I would read that. I actually have reached out to Rob Liefeld's people a couple times because I'm like, I want him on my show. I don't want to talk about Deadpool. I just want to talk about Supreme.
Oh boy, that's if you make that happen, I would love to hear that. I can't wait. That's okay. So now, I did a little bit of Google searching while you were talking. Supreme has shown up a couple times in Image Comics history.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that this is the same character that Warren Ellis did a Supreme Blue Rose, like a 7-issue miniseries about. Right. Which again, amazing comic book written by Warren Ellis. So, big asterisk there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's crazy because that is not the book that Ellis wrote at all.
No.
His is a much softer, more somber book that with a lot of mystery, and it sounds like Supreme is the most action-packed comic you could ever imagine.
Those early issues, it's all adrenaline. It really, and it's been hopped around. I think Rob Liefeld, like, he's just hopped it around to Awesome Comics and Image, and it's, wherever he could get somebody to do the character. And there are a lot of iterations of it because of that, as he's let other people write it. But I just love that. Awful schlock 1993, where's Hitler, yeah.
All right.
Okay, well, wow, all right, so yeah, we've gone full circle on a lot of this. This is wild. Yeah, I don't know, did you guys have any last thoughts you want to bring up? I know we could probably talk about Death of the Author stuff for another 2 or 3 hours. Absolutely. But yeah, I don't know, any last comics that we didn't get to bring up today? I don't know if you guys had anything. I think I've gone through all of my dumb dick and fart joke books, as well as like some modern gritty edgelord stuff from my past. But I don't know, Kara, anything else from you?
Ooh, I guess the only other thing that I would consider, maybe not like a guilty pleasure, but maybe not something that I would recommend to people, just because, similar to what you were saying, Mike, about what I recommend my dumb humor books to people. Like, I have been really, as you know, last year or 2 years ago, I went on a Disney manga odyssey, and there's a very small group of people that I'd recommend Disney manga to, because like the majority of the Disney manga are like written for children, which means that maybe the plots and what's happening aren't going to be as interesting to adult readers. But that's definitely something where it's like, yeah, they're taking up they're taking up space on my bookshelf. And I'm not sorry about that, but also I don't really know many adults who would want to read Kalala Disney Princess. Maybe I'd get some of you to read Stitch and the Samurai, because that's just
we did
right.
We did that.
No, I know.
That was fun.
Right. But like maybe that. But yeah, that's definitely one of those other things where I'm like, I like this, and you might not, and that's fine. But also,
yeah. I
understand this exists to make money, and I bought into that literally.
What doesn't exist just to make money, though? Really?
Like, yeah. That's true. Well, okay. Well, I think that probably wraps up the show. Then I'm glad that we were able to revisit this. It's we went I think a very different direction than I thought it was going to go, but I'm very glad that we did. Well, Zach, I'm very excited to have you as part of the IRCB crew. I guess for folks out there who maybe want to listen to your other stuff, where can they find you on the internet?
Sure. The easiest places to find me, I'm on Instagram at The Comics That We Love, or at Comics and Beer, Comics and Beer Pod. Yeah. At The Comics That We Love, or at Comics and Beer Pod on Instagram. Those are really the only socials that I actively take part in. I'm trying to get better at Twitter. I really am.
It's okay.
At Z_Irish_Red on Twitter. Sometimes I say things, sometimes I don't. And
it's okay.
yeah,
Twitter,
those are the places.
Twitter went down way before that submarine did. So
yeah.
All right. Next week we are actually beginning our month off for the summer, so you don't have to hear from us on a regular show, but we do have some amazing minisodes coming up. Next week we have an interview with a comic creator that has a Kickstarter ongoing, so listen for that. Plus we've got an IRCB movie club episode coming. That's going to be really fun. Ice Cream Man Volume 8 for everyone out there that I know you listen to this podcast feed specifically for Ice Cream Man. Our download numbers show it. They dip every single time we put out an episode. And we've got a book versus book episode with Kara and Kate. That's going to be really, really fun. So look forward to those for the month of July. And we're going to be back in August. I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks in August. And Kara and Paul are going to be leading this whole show. It's going to be wild. So look forward to that when we come back in August. But until then, I guess let's wrap things up here. You can always follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We got our Discord, our Goodreads, our YouTube. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/IRCB podcast. Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all of our music. Zander has all of the power of a world-shattering spirit bomb. I want to say thank you to Kara and Zach for being on the show. Thank you to everyone hanging out with us in Discord today. You're amazing. Thank you to everyone for listening this far in the episode. You're a fantastic human being. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.